You know, when you think about the great, wild stories in rock and roll, few bands can touch the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Their history is just this incredible mix of tragedy, chaos, and somehow absolute triumph. They've been a force of nature for 40 years. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into how they haven't just survived the chaos, but actually seem to thrive on it. And when I say thrive, I mean, look at this number, 120 million. That's how many records they've sold around the world. That puts them in a seriously elite club. But really, their story isn't about the sales figures. It's about how they're even still here to have sales figures. It's about survival. So that's the big question, right? How does a band that's been through addiction, death, and members quitting not just once but multiple times, how do they stick around for 4 decades? What is the secret sauce? What holds these guys together? To figure that out, we gotta go all the way back to the beginning. We're talking early 80s Los Angeles. The whole scene was just crackling with this raw, wild energy. And it's right there, in that mix of funk and punk, that the band's totally unique and, chaotic sound was born. So the band just explodes onto the LA scene in '83. They're this insane mix of sounds. Their first couple of albums capture that energy. And by '87, they're finally getting noticed, hitting the Billboard charts. But just as they're really starting to take off, tragedy hits. Hard. In 1988, their founding guitarist Hillel Slovak dies of a heroin overdose. And it almost ended everything, right then and there. I mean, they were devastated. Drummer Jack Irons just quit. The band was basically shattered. But in what becomes their signature move, Anthony Kiedis and Flea just refuse to let it die. They find this powerhouse drummer, Chad Smith, and this 19-year-old guitar prodigy named John Frusciante. And from those ashes, the most iconic Chili Peppers lineup was born. Okay, so with this new lineup locked in, the band wasn't just getting back on its feet. They were about to take over the entire world. But their road to superstardom was going to be a story of some insane highs, followed by some really, really crushing lows. This album, this was the moment. Blood Sugar Sex Magik wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural atom bomb. It took them from being this beloved LA club band to genuine global superstars, and it pretty much defined the sound of the early 90s. And you've got to remember what was happening at the time. They were out on the road with bands like Pearl Jam and Nirvana. Kiedis even said Nirvana was carrying this heavy magic, calling them a powerful entity. This was the absolute peak of the alternative rock explosion, and the Chili Peppers were smack in the middle of it all. But at their absolute peak, I'm talking winning Grammys, selling out arenas worldwide, the pressure just became too much, especially for John Frusciante. He was this incredibly sensitive, private guy, and being launched into the stratosphere like that was overwhelming. So in the middle of a tour in Japan in 1992, he just quit, walked away. And Kiedis put it perfectly. For someone like John, all that fame was just impossible to handle. He didn't just leave the band, he combusted. And just like that, at the height of their powers, the band was broken again. So after Frusciante left, the band kind of wandered in the wilderness for a few years. They brought in Dave Navarro on guitar, made a much darker album called One Hot Minute, but, that classic chemistry, it just wasn't there. But what happened next is honestly one of the greatest comeback stories in rock history. By 1998, John Frusciante had been through hell. A severe drug addiction had nearly killed him, but he got clean and was ready to play again. Flea went to see him, and they asked him to come back. And when he did, Kiedis said it felt like magic, like this was how it was always supposed to be. And that magic, it poured right into the music. Their reunion album, Californication, was a straight-up phenomenon. It sold even more than Blood Sugar, won them another Grammy, and gave us some of their most timeless songs. This wasn't just a comeback. No way. This was a full-on resurrection. They were bigger than they had ever been. And what came next was a decade of, stability, which is weird for them, right? They had incredible success, their longest run ever with that lineup. They were on top of the world. But for a band that's defined by these cycles, you just knew it couldn't last forever. And this period was just pure dominance. Albums like By the Way and the massive double album Stadium Arcadium were huge. I mean, when Stadium Arcadium debuts at #1 and just sweeps the Grammys, there was no question about it. They were back on top of the music world. And then, in 2009, it happened again. John Frusciante left the band. But this time was different. Kiedis explained it wasn't a sudden explosion like before. It was a holistic decision. John just calmly decided that the whole rock star life, the attention, the travel, the chaos, it just wasn't for him. The cycle repeated, but this time with a bit more wisdom. So after all of this, all these fractures and comebacks and rebirths, we have to get back to that first question. What is it? What's the fundamental thing that holds them together? How do they keep doing this? And the answer isn't just about the music. It's about their absolutely unique chemistry. See, it's not a business partnership for them. It's a brotherhood. They're a family, forged in those early chaotic days. And that bond lets them survive things that would absolutely destroy any other group. It's this deep acceptance of each other, flaws and all. And this quote right here, which Katie shared from a talk he had with Frusciante, this is the whole secret. This is it. They finally figured out that the exact things that drove them crazy about each other were also the source of what made each of them brilliant. That understanding, that's the bedrock. And then, unbelievably, after a decade apart, the cycle turned again. In 2019, Kiedis and Flea both described this kind of psychic moment where they both just knew it was time for John to come back. And at the exact same time, John was feeling that same pull to return. It's crazy. Frusciante himself explained why he came back with this really simple, powerful idea. This time it wasn't about fame or anything like that. It was about reconnecting with his brothers and getting one more chance to do it right, this time with the wisdom they'd all gained over the years. So when you look at their whole story, it's not a straight line. It's a phoenix arc. They burn incredibly bright, then they fall apart, and then they rise from the ashes. A lot of times even stronger than they were before. It's this cycle of destruction and rebirth that really defines them. And that leaves us right here with one final thought. With John back for a third time and 2 new albums dropping in 2022, they're clearly in another one of those creative fire phases. So the question is, for a band that's forever defined by its cycles, what on earth comes next?